The priest in charge of St. John's in Dunbarton, but I'm on the We the People committee as a representative from Christ Church Exeter, where I used to be before I was ordained. So I liked the committee, and the people on the committee wanted me to stay, so that's why I'm still here. And if I could introduce the panel, we have an esteemed group of knowledgeable people here on the subject of prison privatization. Beginning with Arnie Albert to my left, who's the program coordinator of the American Friends Service Committee, based in Concord. Next to him we have Jason Faria, who was the New Hampshire Field Activity Coordinator at the State Employees Association, and you are now
Deputy Director of the Higher Ed Division for Local 615 Service Employees International Union in Boston. So that's Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Southern New Hampshire.
A new job.
Yeah.
Is he a member of the local church?
Jason is a member of Christ Church Exeter. And then finally, Gail Kinney, who is the pastor of the UCC Church in South Danbury, which I hear is between Concord and White River Junction?
Halfway between Concord, New Hampshire and White River Junction, Vermont, yeah.
Great. And she's the author of the UCC resolution opposing prison privatization here in New Hampshire. We had two other speakers lined up. Unfortunately, they had to cancel at the last minute. Actually, one said he might be here, but he's not here, so unfortunately we will miss them. Brad Brockman, who works for Brown University and the Center for Prisoner Health and Human Rights. He had a huge grant proposal that's due tomorrow that came up 2 weeks ago, and he was rushing to finish that. And the Reverend Alice Roberts, who was an Episcopal priest in Newport and former chaplain of the women's prison in Govstown. However, we are well represented, so I don't think that, even though we'd love to have Alice and Brad here, we will do okay. I want to thank the We the People group and the panelists and Exeter Congregational Church. And just a short history of this, we last summer really started to discuss topics for this year, and prison concerns came up as something that would be an interesting topic. And originally we were on to that because Phillips Exeter was going to have a speaker come and get an award who worked in the Texas correctional system, but we were not able to coordinate with her. So and during the course of discussions about what we would present, Alice Roberts, in fact, clued me into the prison privatization issue and how hot an issue it was, and so we decided to focus on that. We originally were going to have this in November. We had a film, Billions Behind Bars, a CNBC documentary we were going to show. Unfortunately, the governor's victory party was scheduled on the same night at the same time, 2 doors down, and we had to cancel. So here we are tonight. Just briefly, I just thought I'd give you a little overview of what the prison situation in America is today. It's out of control as far as numbers, possibly reflecting an out of sight, out of mind kind of feeling. There's more people in prison in the United States today than China and Russia combined. By far, America has more people in prison than any Western country. Americans want to be tough on crime, and that's good, but the toughness equates at this point to wanting to arrest more people and incarcerate more people, which means more prisons are needed, and institutionally the cost and management that ensues has created a crisis situation. That's one way of looking at it. As far as numbers, 2/3 of all released prisoners in America are rearrested within 3 years. Many prisoners max out their sentences so they can be released without parole supervision, and 50% of those are back in prison within 8 or 9 months. 60% of all prisoners have mental health concerns, 85% have drug and alcohol issues, and many have a combination of both. Just to give you an idea of the prison population. As far as costs and aid, the longer the prisoner stays incarcerated, the higher the collective cost, the more overcrowding of prisons. Prisons are heavily dependent on how much money is available to them. In times of recession, prisons lay off staff and conditions worsen. Most prisoners are not violent or have not committed violent crimes. And one question is, how do we deal with that population of people as far as keeping them in prison or even putting many of them in prison to begin with? The cost of caring for a prisoner's needs in New Hampshire, I just heard on New Hampshire Public Radio the other day, is between $30,000 to $50,000 annually. This comes from the Commissioner of Prisons. Outside resources for aiding a released prisoner is limited. Partnerships for outside group in this area with prisons is welcomed if the cost is right. I'm quoting the Commissioner. So we get the sense that this is a system heavily dependent on cost and money, more so than it is for prisoner well-being. However, the presence of over 1,000 volunteers who work in the New Hampshire prisons is a huge help, so there's, I think, opening there. On the local front, the women's prison in Goffstown is overcrowded and the building is too old, and there is currently a question about what to do about that. The previous Governor Lynch was warm to the idea of maybe building a private prison. The current governor is cool to this idea. But I understand that there is an evaluation in the state happening today for companies who could build a prison. There seems to be a group that is studying their finances to see if one of them might be able to do that. And so there's a move afoot to possibly build one in the future. As far as the politics to all this and everything else, I'm going to leave that to our panelists. And I will close by saying that I think Albert Einstein had it right. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. And I'm not sure that the current prison system, or even the idea, or especially the idea of privatization, really jives with that, with the opposite of that statement. What am I trying to say? I'm losing my train of thought. They fit. So without further ado, I'm going to